In the lands of Westeros, where winter stretched its frozen fingers from the north and ambition burned hotter than wildfire in the hearts of men, the survival of Robert Baratheon changed the course of history in ways no one could have anticipated. For the king, grievously wounded yet alive, emerged from the Tower of the Hand not as a man weakened by mortality, but as one tempered by the narrowest margin between life and death, his vision sharpened, his mind attuned to the fragility of kingdoms. And with that clarity, Robert saw what had long escaped him: the subtle manipulations of the Lannisters, the quiet ambitions of Tywin, Cersei, and Jaime, the inefficiencies in the Red Keep's administration, the vulnerabilities of the realm's defenses, and the latent dangers that stretched from the Wall in the north to the distant coasts and seas of the south. And he moved quietly, deliberately, orchestrating authority and influence with a patience born of survival, redistributing appointments, strengthening the loyalty of key officers, reinforcing garrisons, auditing supply lines, fortifying walls, and subtly correcting the failures of governance that had long threatened the stability of his rule, while Tywin Lannister, calculating from Casterly Rock, found himself constrained by a king who could anticipate his moves. And Cersei, accustomed to bending the crown to her will, discovered her whispered schemes anticipated, redirected, or neutralized before they could blossom into power. And Jaime, observing silently, realized that the influence of sword and gold was now secondary to the patient orchestration of intelligence, strategy, and preparation. And beyond King's Landing, Robert extended his vision northward, understanding that the Wall was no longer merely a barrier, but the first line of defense against a threat that men had long denied. For Jon Snow and the Night's Watch reported movements of the dead that were coordinated, intelligent, and relentless, probing defenses with patience and cunning. And Robert integrated these northern reports with the full resources of Winterfell, southern armies, and his fleet, orchestrating a network of readiness, communication, and supply capable of responding to threats both human and supernatural. While Jon trained recruits not only in combat, but in observation, coordination, and adaptation, teaching them to act as part of a living organism designed for survival against an enemy that could not be reasoned with or defeated by brute force alone. And the Wall itself became a hub of surveillance and strategy, its watchmen nodes in a kingdom-wide system of preparation, capable of transmitting intelligence rapidly, coordinating defensive actions, and ensuring that garrisons, villages, and castles could respond to attacks efficiently. While southern ports were fortified, fleets reinforced, and trade routes monitored, all as contingencies against both rebellion and the extraordinary reports from across the narrow sea of dragons gathering and fleets moving. And Robert, now patient, disciplined, and strategically minded, treated these reports as intelligence to act upon, integrating dragons, fleets, garrisons, northern and southern forces into a coordinated system capable of responding to fire, ice, and human ambition simultaneously. And as winter deepened, blanketing forests, mountains, rivers, and rooftops, Westeros itself moved as a living organism, its rhythm dictated by foresight, preparation, and the quiet but absolute hand of a king who had survived death. While Tywin, frustrated at his diminishing influence, recalculated endlessly, Cersei plotted quietly, Jaime watched helplessly, and the kingdom adapted to each new threat with an efficiency and discipline previously unimaginable. And across the north, patrols intercepted formations of the dead, noting patterns and strategies. Their observations fed into Winterfell and King's Landing to refine deployment and tactics, while southern contingents prepared for possible dragon incursions, integrating naval readiness, coastal defenses, and rapid response forces into the same unified network. And in this integrated system, every lord, officer, soldier, and scout acted as part of a larger organism, ensuring that no single failure could endanger the survival of the realm. And as Robert walked through the Red Keep, observing courtiers, guards, and soldiers, noting inefficiencies and correcting them quietly, he understood that true power was not in swords, feasts, or proclamations, but in the orchestration of the kingdom itself into a living, adaptive, and resilient system capable of surviving fire, ice, treachery, and calamity itself. And the rhythm of preparation, discipline, and foresight pulsed invisibly through every corner of Westeros, from the Wall to the Red Keep, from Winterfell to the southern ports. And as the undead moved in coordinated formations, as dragons crossed distant waters, and as human ambition tested loyalties and boundaries, The kingdom, though outwardly calm, had transformed into a living organism, capable of responding to threats faster than they could escalate. And Westeros, reborn under a king who had faced death, breathed with a new rhythm, one defined by vigilance, foresight, patience, and unity. And in that transformation, every house, noble or minor, participated in the survival of the realm, consciously or not, as part of a network that allowed rebellion, war, undead, and dragons to be met with a response both rapid and calculated. And while Tywin, Cersei, and Jaime struggled against a system they could not disrupt, Robert continued to strengthen it, reinforcing communication, refining supply, fortifying borders, and training officers to think beyond their own ambitions, creating a kingdom that could endure the extraordinary. And the Wall, Winterfell, King's Landing, and southern ports all functioned as parts of a greater organism, linked through intelligence, loyalty, and preparation, capable of surviving calamities that history had once deemed inevitable. And as frost covered the land, as scouts reported undead movements and dragon sightings, as fleets sailed to intercept threats, and as garrisons maintained discipline and readiness, the kingdom itself became more than land, castles, or armies. It became a system, alive, adaptive, and prepared, a kingdom guided by the hand of a king who had refused to die, and now wielded foresight, strategy, and patience as weapons against fate itself. And beneath snow, shadow, and fire, the realm moved as a living, coordinated, and resilient organism, ready for rebellion, undead, dragons, and history itself, its heartbeat defined by survival, endurance, and the subtle but absolute orchestration of a king who understood that true power was not the crown, the sword, or fear, but the ability to see, prepare, and endure, shaping Westeros into a kingdom that could withstand fire, ice, treachery, and destiny all at once. And as the torchlit streets of King's Landing flickered beneath the first snow of winter, as patrols moved silently across northern passes, as fleets prepared for dragon attacks, and as garrisons maintained discipline and readiness, the kingdom itself had become more than land, castles, or armies. It became a living organism of endurance, discipline, and strategic foresight, coordinated, resilient, and ready for the extraordinary. A kingdom reborn through the survival of its king, a realm prepared for fire, ice, and ambition alike. And in that unity, in that readiness, in that deliberate orchestration of every corner of Westeros, Westeros breathed with a new rhythm, one defined by vigilance, foresight, patience, and unity.
In King's Landing, the heartbeat of power pulsed not in swords or feasts, but in whispers, alliances, and subtle manipulations. And Robert, having survived near death and tempered by the clarity such an experience brings, observed the movements of his court with unprecedented scrutiny, noting every tilt of the head, every glance, every conversation that carried ambition or deceit. And he began to move quietly but decisively, reinforcing loyal officers, redistributing key appointments, fortifying garrisons, auditing supply lines, and establishing systems of accountability that left the Lannisters with less room to maneuver than ever before. And Tywin, accustomed to directing kings like pieces on a chessboard, found himself restrained by a monarch who could anticipate moves before they were made, while Cersei plotted subtly, her schemes frustrated by Robert's quiet orchestration, and Jaime, ever the observer, realized that the influence of sword and charm alone could not overcome strategy, patience, and discipline. And beyond the Red Keep, Robert extended his vision to the southern territories, reinforcing ports, strengthening fleets, monitoring trade, and establishing rapid response contingents capable of responding to rebellion, invasion, or even dragon incursions. While intelligence networks spanning the north, the south, and the coasts transmitted observations from scouts, envoys, and watchmen to a central system in which every detail informed preparation, deployment, and survival. And as reports of dead gathering across the narrow sea increased, Robert treated them not as myth but as intelligence, dispatching fleets, fortifying coastal defenses, and training crews to act as part of a coordinated defensive organism capable of responding to fire as well as ice. While the Northern Lords, coordinated through Winterfell and Jon Snow's vigilant oversight, reinforced key passes, repaired fortifications, and prepared garrisons, all integrated seamlessly with southern resources, creating a kingdom capable of moving as a single organism in response to threats. And the Wall, ancient and silent, became a hub of observation and coordination, with patrols feeding intelligence on the movements of the dead back to Winterfell and King's Landing, while Jon Snow trained his men not only in combat, but in observation, coordination, and adaptive strategy, ensuring that Northern forces could act with precision and intelligence as part of a kingdom-wide system. And as frost spread across forests, rivers, and mountains, the kingdom operated as a living organism, every officer, soldier, and lord acting within a framework designed to maximize survival, while Southern contingents coordinated with Northern patrols and fleets, establishing contingency plans for rebellion, undead, and dragon incursions alike. And Tywin, frustrated by the inability to influence the crown, recalculated endlessly, attempting to regain control through subtle moves, while Cersei's plots were anticipated and neutralized before they could gain traction. And Jaime observed helplessly as the strategic orchestration of Robert's reign rendered ambition secondary to discipline, coordination, and foresight. And as winter deepened, reports of undead formations increased, their movements becoming more coordinated and intelligent, probing villages, forests, and fortifications with deliberate patience. And Robert, integrating these reports with supply lines, garrisons, and rapid response contingents, ensured that the kingdom could respond to these threats swiftly and effectively, while scouts and northern lords documented every pattern, feeding intelligence into a central system that coordinated troop movements, reinforcements, and logistical support across the realm. And the southern fleets, prepared for dragons, integrated naval readiness, coastal defenses, and intelligence reports into the same organism, ensuring that Westeros could act in unison against fire, ice, and treachery, while courtiers, officers, and soldiers acted within this system without fully understanding the scope of the kingdom-wide integration that now guided every decision, every patrol, and every reinforcement. And as months passed, the network grew stronger, refining responses to the undead, dragons, rebellion, and espionage. While Tywin, Cersei, and Jaime found themselves constrained, their influence diminished by the patient orchestration of intelligence, preparation, and foresight. And beyond the capital, northern garrisons strengthened key passes, repaired fortifications, and coordinated seamlessly with southern troops, while Jon Snow trained the Night's Watch to act as both observers and nodes in a larger network, ensuring that no incursion, whether human or supernatural, could reach the heart of the kingdom without triggering a coordinated response. And as snow blanketed rooftops, forests, and mountains, as scouts reported movements of the undead and dragon sightings intensified in the east, the kingdom moved with a rhythm dictated not by fear or impulse, but by discipline, foresight, and the unseen orchestration of a king who had survived death. And in King's Landing, the court learned to operate within new boundaries of loyalty, discipline, and expectation, while Tywin's endless plotting and Cersei's whispers could influence little in the face of Robert's integrated system. And Jaime, observing silently, realized that the kingdom itself had become the ultimate instrument of control and survival. And as fleets sailed to intercept potential dragon attacks, as northern forces patrolled passes and fortifications, and as supply lines, reinforcements, and communication networks operated seamlessly, Westeros itself had transformed from scattered regions into a living, breathing organism capable of surviving calamity on every front, from rebellion and human ambition to fire, ice, and supernatural forces. And Robert understood fully that the survival of the kingdom required not just soldiers and swords, but foresight, patience, coordination, and a system capable of adapting to the unpredictable movements of enemies both human and beyond. And as the torchlit streets of King's Landing flickered beneath winter snow, as patrols maintained discipline across northern passes, as fleets prepared for dragons, and as Jon Snow trained men to act intelligently and cohesively in the face of unimaginable threats, the kingdom moved as one, a living organism of endurance, foresight, and coordination, each action contributing to the survival of the realm. And the heartbeat of Westeros, though invisible to most, pulsed steadily under the patient orchestration of a king who refused to die. A kingdom reborn through survival, strategy, and preparation, capable of meeting rebellion, treachery, undead, and dragons with equal precision and resilience. And beneath frost, fire, and shadow, the realm breathed with a new rhythm, one that promised survival in a world that history had once declared destined to destroy it.
Beyond the wall, where the winds cut like blades and the forests lay blanketed under unending snow, the Night's Watch reported movements that no man could have imagined. Formations of the dead growing larger, more coordinated, and terrifyingly intelligent, probing every weak point in northern defenses, testing patrols, scouting villages, and challenging castles with a relentless, methodical patience. And Jon Snow, whose leadership had been sharpened by hardship and honed under the strategic oversight of King Robert, drilled his men not only in combat, but in observation, communication, and adaptive tactics, ensuring that every soldier could operate as part of a larger organism, capable of responding to threats faster than they could materialize, while Robert, coordinating from King's Landing through an unprecedented network of intelligence and command, integrated northern reports, southern reinforcements, and logistical support into a living system that allowed the kingdom to act as one against both human ambition and the supernatural menace rising in the frozen north. And northern lords, once isolated and slow to act, now moved with purpose, repairing fortifications, reinforcing garrisons, and coordinating supply lines with southern forces, while scouts documented patterns of the dead, providing crucial intelligence that informed troop deployment, defensive positions, and strategy in real time. And across the narrow sea, the first glimpses of dragons moving with fleets and fire became undeniable, and Robert, who had learned the value of foresight from surviving death, treated these threats with the same meticulous planning applied to rebellion and undead, fortifying southern coasts, training naval crews, preparing rapid response contingents, and ensuring that both northern and southern forces were integrated into a coordinated system capable of meeting fire, ice, and treachery simultaneously. And as winter deepened across forests, mountains, and rivers, the rhythm of Westeros shifted, its heartbeat now defined by preparation, discipline, and the invisible but absolute orchestration of a king who had survived death, while Tywin Lannister, endlessly calculating, found his influence constrained as his plots were anticipated and neutralized. Cersei's whispered schemes faltered in the face of Robert's strategy, and Jaime, observing the kingdom's transformation, realized that the ultimate instrument of power was no longer swords, gold, or charm, but the patient, coordinated orchestration of every element of the realm. And as northern patrols intercepted undead formations and reported increasingly complex patterns, and as southern fleets sailed to intercept dragon movements, the kingdom responded as one, a living organism in which each garrison, ship, and soldier contributed to collective survival. While supply lines operated seamlessly, reinforcements moved with precision, and communication networks allowed intelligence to travel from the wall to King's Landing and back in moments, enabling rapid, adaptive responses that had once been impossible. And beyond the Red Keep, Robert walked through corridors, observing courtiers, soldiers, and officers, noting lapses, inefficiencies, and vulnerabilities, and quietly correcting them, ensuring that the rhythm of the kingdom, though invisible, remained steady, disciplined, and prepared for any contingency. While across the north, Jon Snow coordinated with northern lords to integrate their forces into the same organism, training, supplying, and preparing them for a confrontation that could determine the survival of humanity itself. And as undead movements intensified, as dragons approached from the east, and as whispers of rebellion and treachery spread through southern territories, Westeros moved as a single coordinated organism, its heartbeat dictated by intelligence, preparation, and foresight. And in King's Landing, the court operated within new boundaries of loyalty, accountability, and expectation, while Tywin, Cersei, and Jaime found their maneuvering constrained by a system they could not disrupt. And beyond the city, northern garrisons, southern armies, and fleets coordinated in real time, reinforcing each other, anticipating attacks,
and neutralizing threats before they could escalate. And as dragons crossed the narrow sea, their presence tested both naval and land defenses, but the integrated system of Westeros responded effectively, with fleets intercepting, garrisons reinforcing strategic points, and southern and northern forces acting in concert, creating a coordinated, adaptive response that ensured survival despite the extraordinary magnitude of the threat. And as frost blanketed villages, forests, and mountains, as scouts monitored undead formations, and as the Red Keep coordinated responses across the realm, Westeros moved not as a collection of individual regions, but as a living, breathing system of endurance, foresight, and resilience, where every soldier, officer, and lord acted as part of a larger organism, and the kingdom itself became capable of surviving calamities previously thought inevitable, from rebellion to dragons, from treachery to winter, and even the intelligent movements of the dead. While Robert, walking beneath torchlight and snow, understood that his survival had granted him more than life. It had granted him the power to remake the kingdom into a system capable of enduring history's greatest threats. And beneath fire, frost, and shadow, Westeros breathed with a new rhythm, coordinated, disciplined, and resilient, a kingdom reborn, prepared for fire, ice, ambition, and the unimaginable, a realm in which strategy, foresight, and survival had replaced chaos, indulgence, and failure. And as scouts relayed intelligence from the Wall, Winterfell, and southern ports, as fleets and garrisons moved in precise coordination, and as Jon Snow and Robert executed their plans with adaptive intelligence, the kingdom became more than land and people. It became a living organism, capable of responding to threats before they could endanger the realm. And in this transformation, the heartbeat of Westeros pulsed steadily under the hand of a king who had refused to die, orchestrating the survival of his people, the endurance of his lands, and the resilience of his kingdom against rebellion, treachery, dragons, and the armies of the dead. And as the northern frost spread, as dragons circled above distant seas, and as every patrol, fleet, and garrison played its part in the greater organism of survival, Westeros had become a kingdom capable of meeting history's greatest threats and emerging intact, disciplined, prepared, and coordinated under a king whose near death had forged both his mind and his realm into something stronger than anyone had imagined. And beneath fire, frost, and shadow, the kingdom moved as a single organism, a living, adaptive, and resilient Westeros, ready to face fire, ice, ambition, and destiny itself, united under foresight, patience, and the quiet but absolute orchestration of a king who had survived death and would not allow the realm to fall.